people. So we'll be all right. So quick introduction. My name is Chris Mulholland. I'm a designer with Amstead. Almost 16 years. I guess my anniversary is at the end of June. So yeah, we'll have to update this slide in like a month. I'm Adaptiv Home Certified, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, creating an accessible home, or we've renamed it to, what is it now? Accessible by design, all the same thing. So we'll have a nice chat about it. And yeah, hopefully we get lots of good questions. So we'll try to take half an hour probably for the presentation, and then more time for questions at the end. A bit about Amstead. We've been in business for 37 years. We do, as it says, full service. So renovations, additions, custom homes, pretty much anything of any size, really. And I know we're virtual, so I don't know exactly where everybody's from, but we service everywhere from Ottawa to Rockville and all sorts of stuff in between. There is a map on our website. If you happen to be in between those places, that can help decide. So that's on there. And then, yeah, kind of for this presentation, we won the first Adaptiv Universal Design Award at the Home Builders Awards a couple years ago now. So that was really exciting for us. So talking about universal design, there's a lot of different names for it. So we usually start with this as a bit of an introduction. Universal design is one that everyone hears. It comes with a lot of different products. It's not specifically architecture. It's from the 1960s, so the idea has been around a really long time. But you'll hear about it in schools with the way stuff is presented to students, and say in consumer products and in architecture as well. Accessible is the term that we use a lot. It's probably the most understandable, maybe. And the Rick-Hansen Foundation uses that as well, because they will certify accessibility. So it's a good term to use that way. Adaptiv, without an E, is very specific. It's a training program offered by the Canadian Home Builders Association. At Amstead, we have two designers who are Adaptiv Certified. So we'll talk a bit about that kind of near the end of the presentation. And then Adaptiv with an E is the more generic idea of having a home that you can change as you need it, as you age in place or as conditions changes or things like that. So that's sort of what we're talking about when we look at those various different terms. A few myths we talk about accessible designs, not only for old people. We are all aging, so there is some of that, but there's lots of other conditions that this comes up. Smart home tech, definitely not a luxury. When the guidebook that we used from Adaptiv was written, it was, even though it was a couple of years ago, the tech has gone so far even in 2 years. So that it's almost outdated. It's like, yeah, smart tech's everywhere. We will talk a bit about AI and stuff later on too. And then adaptive renovations are too expensive. That's when we hear all the time. Certainly, if you get to needing very large interventions for something like an elevator, then there are costs included that come with that. But very simple adaptive things, some of which we'll look at through the presentation, don't have to have that much cost. And if you're already doing a renovation, taking into account some adaptive ideas may not lead to any higher cost at all, as long as you consider it when you're doing your renovation already. We do have a few accessibility facts. 92% of seniors still live in a private home, which often means that those homes need some kind of adjustment to them. 1 in 5 Canadians 15 or over have reported having some kind of a disability. Now, this census number back from a couple of years. We'll get the new census. Hopefully everyone filled it out. We'll have some new numbers in a year or two. But that number probably hasn't changed a ton. And then about half of Canadians needed some kind of aid-assisted device accessibility feature. That could be anything from a ramp to an elevator to maybe just wider doors, something like that. It's quite a broad number. If you imagine half of everyone with the physical disability needing something done in their house, though, that's a huge area where hopefully we can help. Oops. So a few reasons. Avoid moving or downsizing. We work with, we have a number of clients right now we're working with where moving was a huge factor. And we always want to, especially as kind of has been renovations over the last 37 years or so, ideal if we can keep someone in their own house or in their own neighborhood. In some cases, a renovation works. We are doing now one where we're knocking down the existing house, is building a new one to make a custom home that's fully accessible. But that way you can stay in a neighborhood. We've sort of joked all this time that we can change anything about your house you want, can't change the neighborhood you're in. So that's a great reason to start looking at adaptive things as part of your renovation. You can stay in a neighborhood that you love, or maybe have support in, or have family nearby a lot longer. So other reasons is safe for families and guests. Visitability is incredibly hard to say. And another term we could have included up front. It is something that's coming into effect maybe in future building codes, but that's the idea that if something is visitable, it may not be as accessible as it would be if someone was living there, but it means you might have a powder room that guests who need that extra space can use. And hopefully by the time it's in the code, I'll be able to say it. And then multi-generational living is another huge one. I know other cities, places like Toronto, Vancouver, have been working with multi-generational ideas for a very long time. They're coming more in Ottawa. We've done a couple of really neat multi-generational projects for families, and those can have some adaptive features and other things. There's a lot of flexibility in how they work, but adaptive or accessible parts of those projects is a really good thing to consider if you're going into that. So a few more facts. Mobility conditions are the ones that we think of, I think, top of mind the most when someone thinks an accessible home. A lot of times it's, okay, I got to have a wider door, I got to have a ramp, I got to have this kind of mobility stuff. And that's where maybe everyone goes. But there are other things that we can adapt the home for. So something like sensory conditions. Sometimes you have to look at how the layout is. We focus here that maybe having an open concept isn't the best, depending on what kind of sensory condition might have. Lighting comes into account that way. It may be something with noise sensitivity. You may need to consider different kinds of soundproofing. So that kind of thing is what we're talking about with sensory conditions. And then cognitive conditions, obviously things you can see the cost there related to dementia. So if we can do things that can help people with cognitive difficulty stay in their home longer, then we can help reduce that and also make it easier on people who are trying to support them. So there's big factors there. We do also talk a bit about falls because this slide is probably the scariest slide we've got. Every 13 seconds in Canada, an older adult is treated for a fall in an emergency department. That number is crazy. It, like, when you consider how big that is, and as you go down this stat, the cost of healthcare is massive. So if we can do a better job adjusting our homes to make them less likely to have slips and falls, and we've got some pictures later on of that, we can definitely make it safer, reduce costs, and reduce that risk of health, right? 95% of hip fractures coming from falls, and then a quarter of people with a hip fracture do pass away within 6 months of fracturing the hip. So that's something that we can't take away all the risk, but as designers, we can try to mitigate it in the choices we make in designing homes. And that's something you want to talk about as we work through any project. So then some facts. So this is a fun one. I think this slide is available possibly on our website. You'll be able to review this presentation. Anyway, these are some of the most common things that are done as an adaptive renovation. So obviously, number one, grab bars. They've been super available, super easy to install. So they are easily the number one thing that gets done. But as you can see, it goes down. Comfort height toilets are also really common because they're almost all that we install nowadays. Curbless showers, that kind of thing as you go, and you can see sort of as you go down the list. Also some ideas on what you might want to consider doing if you're looking at maybe very early on in the planning, depending on if it's more future-proofing as opposed to a specific condition that you're thinking of. Some of these might be good ideas to consider for a renovation. So, and I think we have pictures of most of them. Here we go. The fun part starts. Less talking, more pictures. Entries. So we kind of go as you get into the house. The first spot you run into needing some kind of adaptation is typically at the entrance to the home. This is a really cool one. Oh, we got a note about Toto toilets. Yeah, Toto toilets are a fantastic toilet. We have them in our offices actually, so maybe we're biased. So ramps in this case, the we'll talk a bit about the building code as well as the comparison to a document called B65223. We'll get into what the difference is later. But the OBC is the Ontario Building Code, and the other is a CAN CSA regulation that talks about accessible homes. So the OBC requires a ramp of 1 in 12, which is okay. If you're using a manually powered mobility device, maybe a chair that you have to push or like a walker, something like that, that can still be quite steep. So we look at trying to go between 1 in 20 and 1 in 15 if we're doing a ramp. And the ramp out front, as you see in this picture, does not have to be a big wooden thing, or here at our office, we have a metal one that we can, that's kind of temporary when we put out. It's not very attractive, but if we're looking at planning a renovation ahead, this one is awesome. It's all landscaped in, nice gentle slope, and from the street, you can't really tell that it's anything other than just some really great hardscaping. Um, if you've got a house that's particularly high, it can be challenging. So if you're over 30 inches from like grade to your first floor, um, you might need to consider an exterior lift. There are companies here that do those, so no big deal. Obviously a little more cost and a little more maintenance. But the ramp to go up 30 inches, as you can imagine, if you're going 1 in 20, that is a huge ramp. Even at 1 in 12, it's quite substantial. So we find that anything over that 30 inches, we're probably looking at some kind of mechanical device of some sort. Part of the entry as well, so not necessarily a ramp, but this can be combined with the ramp, is how to actually make the door and area a little bit safer. So the porch overhang, in both of these cases, you can see that it slopes away from where the step is. So even if the eavesdropping is getting overflowed or there's no eavesdropping, depending on what it is, the slope of the roof is taking the water away from where the step is. So that kind of consideration, just how the roof is designed, can start making it a little bit safer as you go. Exterior doors, so sizes of exterior doors, how they're located and covered. You want the walkway to be as level as possible to avoid that risk of tripping and falling or having spots where water can freeze up. And then increased lighting. So one of these, you can't really see the light, it's tucked in behind, but you can see a nice big light on the one on the right. And there's some really neat soffit light options that do a fantastic job lighting up the space at night without necessarily changing the aesthetic. So if you don't like the look of a hanging light, the ones in the soffits are great. Entries do come with a couple of things to consider. Setbacks are one. So if anyone's been watching the news here in Ottawa lately, they'll probably have heard something about new zoning. That's what governs the setbacks. So there are some limitations on how far out you can go into your front yard or side yards. Most of the time, if you're building a ramp, the majority of those can be altered to accommodate the ramp. So setbacks, there are still some to follow, but if it's the situation with a ramp, there's a lot more flexibility. There are minimums areas of yard and soft landscaping, so that's gotten a little bit stricter in the new zoning. Again, for ramps and stuff, they do make some modifications to that, but if you're just doing steps and trying to have a hardscape surface this level, that may come into play a bit too. Heritage Act and overlays are another one. So those are very specific areas if you live in somewhere like Rockcliffe Park. There'll be different things about those regulations that change it. Mature neighborhoods are actually disappearing in the new zoning, so hopefully the next time we give this presentation, we can take that out. Not officially out until probably September, but so that'll make things a little bit easier. One less thing to consider. There are new stormwater requirements, so they took one out and added one back in. That's the way zoning works. And then there's an urban tree bylaw. So that's where we've got this picture in here. If you are building a ramp, as much as there's some flexibility in setbacks, they're still a little more strict when it comes to damaging the roots of trees. So when we can, we look at using helical piles. It looks like a giant screw with a metal spike on the end. You can build on top of the metal spike, and the screw just goes down as far as it has to hit the resistance. If you have the chance, they're really cool to watch them put in the ground. The guys with the little machine that drill them in are really good. So it's definitely fun to do, but it's a fantastic solution if you're trying to preserve a tree. Not just for regulations, but most of the time we don't want to take out a tree either. So this is a really good solution. So after entryways, it gets the stairs. A bit of a joke on this one. It's that really pretty nice open staircase that looks good in a magazine, but open riser staircases tend to be rather dangerous for anyone with sort of decreased mobility. Sometimes people with decreased vision can struggle with those. So we put a big X through them. If we're doing an adaptive home, we don't really want to do those. Obviously, if you really love one, we'd consider it. But if you're looking at, say, very adaptive advice, not a great way to go. Something like these with nice contrasting colors. You can see the one on the right, very high contrast. So someone with reduced vision, having the painted riser within a dark tread makes it really easy to see that contrast so you don't miss a step. The one on the left is talking about material selection. So in that case, if you've got sort of reduced mobility or maybe some balance concerns, having, well, first off, the two railings on either side, so you can grab either way, but also it's carpeted. So the traction and grip on carpet is a lot better that way. You always get an interesting challenge where carpet has downsides too with different allergens and stuff. So you may have to pick the carpet really carefully. But as far as mobility and balance goes, it's a really great choice for stairs to keep them safe. Next, elevators. So we do mention elevators. We have put in a number of different ones. You can see the tube. Kind of looks like something out of a sci-fi set. It's very cool. They do come in different sizes. This is not typically large enough to hold a full wheelchair. There are a couple models where they're a little bit more oblong that do, but the round tubular ones are more meant if your maybe your mobility device is a walker or a cane or something like that. They're surprisingly small and they can actually retrofit into different cases. This house that we put it in is probably early 1900s. The framing was a little bit wonky to try to put it in, but it was able to tuck in a corner. It looks great. Did the job for these particular homeowners. The other one, a lot more substantial. So that one is sort of hidden inside of a closet space, essentially. It's actually between two units in a multi-generational home, which is kind of cool as well. But it's nice and big. So if you're considering someone who is using a larger mobility device, they're wheelchair user, or someone is assisting them, then you need room for two people potentially in the elevator at the same time. If it's a kid, maybe you might have a parent or adult, or even an adult with a personal service worker. So that's where the larger elevator makes more sense. That doesn't really work for the fun tube ones, but the fun tube ones are a bit of a statement piece. So if they work for you, very cool. Floor transitions. So this is another one we talk a lot about with slips and falls, and another one of those things that actually doesn't change the cost a lot. So if you're planning ahead to do a renovation, if you're already changing floors, to consider how those transitions work. It's a little bit of planning ahead, but as for the actual construction cost, doesn't necessarily change it a lot. So you can see the one on the left, it's kind of funky. So this one was actually done just to look cool. There was no accessibility consideration in it, but it's perfectly level. So there's no step as you change from the tile to the hardwood floor. There's just an extra layer of subfloor underneath one of them, makes it level out. And as long as it's planned for, no problem. And you can see it looks, I say it looks kind of funky. It's not everyone's taste. We always get sort of interesting feedback on that slide, but the clients we did it for really liked it. So the other one, a little bit more traditional, hardwood floors. You can see this house actually has a ramp. It was a 1960s-ish house, so kind of neat split level, but split levels do need a little bit of work if you're going for accessibility. So this one has a ramp in between the two levels. And then as you go through that sunroom that's behind the fireplace, it's level right out to an exterior like patio. So there's tiles on the same level as the hardwood floor, and then the transitions between the doors are all sunken into that as well. So it's nice and smooth as you go out. So less trips. Doors, we did mention early on door width. So you always want 34 inches clear. In some cases, you're looking at 36 inches clear, depending on the nature of the mobility device. That can be a little bit tricky with exterior doors. Not every manufacturer makes a standard 36-inch wide door, which would give you 34. Sorry, a 38-inch wide door, which would give you the clear opening of 36. The 36 standard gives you 34, which is pretty common. So if you're looking for the full 36 opening, you either have to use a fancy hinge, that's what we show here, or end up ordering a 42-inch exterior door, which isn't necessarily ideal. So this hinge is kind of cool. It's a retrofit one, so if you've got existing doors and they're close, you just need them a bit wider. You can pick these up actually as a like do-it-yourself option almost. You can get them at Home Depot. It might be a custom order depending on your location. And you can put these on just in place in the existing hinge, and you see they kind of flip the door out so that that space that the door slab itself takes up, that takes away from the opening, is moved outside of the opening. So you have that entire width to go through. It's a nice option if you've got existing 34-inch doors that you want to open all the way. That's a great solution. And again, a really nice do-it-yourselfer one. So if you're just looking at kind of early on doing some modifications, this is a really easy one. Pocket doors, this is a little bit more invasive if you're altering them for sure. But it's a nice option to consider if you've got the space. So it's a little bit easier to open a pocket door if you have to go and approach it sideways, or you've got a mobility device kind of in your hand or in your way. And then one thing we do with the pocket doors, you see this one's into an ensuite. We actually have oversized the opening for this pocket door. So it's, I think we went 38 on the door. So the opening is 36, or 36 and a 34 opening. But what that, by opening the door a little bit more, it lets us the space to have the handle stay exposed. So it's a lot easier to grab onto a handle like this that's sort of a D shape or a long bar, instead of trying to reach inside and grab that little knobby thing that pops out from a typical pocket door opener. So it's a couple extra inches on the size of the door, but then you can have a whole handle to grip instead. It makes it a ton easier to try to function, and you can still put a lock on it. I know it's kind of the concern that comes up. Well, how do I lock it? There's still devices to lock it, so no worries that way if you're looking for the kind of the privacy if it's on a bathroom or something. But even using these for bedrooms or different doors, depending on the level of accessibility, the pocket door works really well. Actually, honestly, I kind of like the look of the handle over the little mini things anyway, but functionally, they're really good. So doors, a couple more notes. So thresholds, that's where you actually come in over the door. Ideally, we want a 13mm max. It's super hard to get manufacturers that have a really low threshold, especially ones that sell into Canada, because we have snow. So they always want a little bit higher. We do have little ramp pieces that can add on. Or as I mentioned a couple of slides ago, we've actually sunk some pocket doors into the framing a bit more, which, as long as you've got a nice cover on the outside, as part of your entryway, then you're safer to do that. If you're very exposed in your door, we'd want to look at how to treat that a different way. But if we can get a really nice cover over it, reduces the risk of kind of water and snow and stuff coming in. Couple interesting notes. So if you're actually following that CSA regulation I mentioned, the B 652, you can't use a doorknob at all. So they require either a lever or that D-shaped pull. And kind of a fun note, back in 2014, Vancouver's building code actually banned doorknobs. So it's been more than 10 years since you were allowed by code to put a doorknob in the city of Vancouver. Vancouver's weird. They get their own building code, and they do some interesting things. But that was sort of one at the time that that caught everyone a little bit by surprise. And then as we've moved along, it makes a lot of sense. Doorknob can be very difficult to grab with any kind of nerve issues, or even injuries can make it hard. So it's certainly a good thing to consider if you're looking at accessibility. Some more fun kind of options. We did mention smart devices not being a luxury. So you can see here a USB charging outlet. Anyone who's got sort of folks that they know that maybe have some kind of neurodivergence or ASD, something like that, you'll be familiar with all the various devices you can use. Some of them allow communication to someone who might be nonverbal, and those often now plug in with USB. So having these little outlets available, Ontario Building Code. We'll pop back to that question after, if that's okay. Amanda won't let me forget. She's on the call too. She's kind of managing things from behind, so she'll make sure I come back to it, because I might have to think through on building code stuff. So the USB charging outlets are super handy to have everywhere. We will often put one in the kitchen, but if you've got someone who might have a space elsewhere where you need to be charging your device, maybe a bedroom or kind of a living room space, we can add those in. Smart switches and occupancy sensors are another one. Occupancy sensors are amazing. It's basically a motion sensor. So you open a door, you walk into a room, as long as you're moving around, it's okay. If you're staying in the space longer, It makes more sense in that case to use something like a smart switch or maybe an AI switch that you can talk to and tell it to turn on and off, or use a device to punch in. If it's something that you can't speak to, you can punch it on your phone or another device. The occupancy sensors are cool if you're passing through a hallway. You don't have to worry about flipping lights on and off, but they are tricky if you're in a room and aren't moving all the time. They will eventually time out. So that's where the smart ones come in. Um, Remotes are another one. It kind of all gets tied in with the AI now. I think even the Google Homes and all those various, oh, be careful what I say in case it's listening on anyone's device. All of those different ones now are pretty integrated with a lot of different light switches options, and a lot of different now AI that's built in that can help be a little bit more predictive when it comes to how someone's using the room. So setting up schedules and setting up, okay, if this person's in the room, how do I behave? And the AI's got a lot more clever with how to do that and setting it up. So some really neat options that way. So lighting, I mean, lighting's important for everyone, but there are a number of different conditions that can reduce your vision, which then makes lighting even more important. Macular degeneration is one that they talked about in sort of the courses we take, especially amongst older Canadians, but not exclusively. So we want to look at lighting really carefully. We try to do a lot of layers of lighting. That's why we got this picture. There's a lot of layers in lighting. Obviously, some of them a bit more decorative, but we've got very focused task lighting. You can see over the island and then the kitchen sink in the background where the windows are. Some very focused kind of sconces in there. General lighting with pot lights, and then under counter lighting so that you've got a lot of different options. We do talk about motion sensor lighting in here too, because a lot of devices can have the motion sensor built in. So instead of having an additional switch, if you've got an outlet or a fixture, say in a closet, that's where we use it a lot of times. They'll just be built in this. You don't ever have to worry about the switch. So bathrooms are a huge one. We got a few slides on bathrooms. Obviously, the big one we talked about earlier on is grab bars. The code does require that you plan for future installation in at least one bathroom in your home. So typically, if it's a big reno or a custom home, it's the main bathroom, unless we know otherwise. In a lot of custom homes where accessibility is taken into account, it's probably in multiple bathrooms, the powder room, the main bath, maybe an ensuite, something like that. So the backing, the code does require a specific location for the backing. The downside of using the code location is that it's very specific and generalized and may not meet the needs of the person using in the future. So you definitely want to plan ahead if you know those specifically. One thing we like to do is put in behind all the drywall and stuff, we'll just put a sheet of plywood that gives you flexibility to install. So you're not trying to hit a stud. You've got backing basically everywhere to install different grab bars and stuff like that. Makes it a lot easier to adapt for different heights or different kinds of injury in the future, or changing conditions if you've got something that some sort of condition that's going to change as time goes on, right? That you don't necessarily need your grab bar or your bench or anything else at the same place you might need it today. So that's where that flexibility comes in. Comfort height toilets we mentioned, those are just comfortable. So we tend to do them all the time anyway. They're pretty common. And I say, I don't remember the last time for any reason we installed a non-comfort height one. Bidets are getting a lot more common. So what we've been doing lately is installing an additional electrical outlet in behind the toilet for the add-on bidet item. We don't do a ton of bidets separate. We usually plan for the piece that goes on. But if it's something you may want to consider, you want to make sure that in your electrical planning, whoever's installing it, electrician, your builder, includes that extra outlet. So you're not trying to retrofit it in later, right? And then curbless showers, we've got seats and benches. You can see the open cabinet sink in this case. So there are very specific regulations around how open cabinet sinks are designed to roll under. That way things are kept safe. So there's protections around how the piping is installed so that no one accidentally burns themselves, that kind of thing. So stuff to be aware of if that's where you need to go. Obviously, curbless showers are another one that we tend to install a lot just because they look really nice, but they do have a really good upside for accessibility. Obviously, no threshold to trip on. Easy to clean, easy to have a mobility device kind of go right into without having to worry about moving it around something else. And then walk-in tubs, of course, we've installed a number of these now. They've gotten a lot better than they used to be for the walk-in tubs. So a lot more comfortable, draining a lot quicker, which used to be a challenge. And then also one of these is actually a retrofit option. So we modified the front of the tub. It's the one on the left. It's a fairly standard tub. They didn't want to replace the tub in its entirety and go to a full walk-in, or replace just go to kind of a shower with a bench. They still wanted the tub options. So we've sort of retrofit in that lowered step area at the front. So you can actually sit on it and kind of slide in. You can step over it easier. It gave a lot of flexibility without having to sort of blow out the whole bathroom and go with a more specific device. So a really neat option for just a little bit of added accessibility and flexibility. And then some other sort of general universal design features. So we want to accommodate turning circles. Turning circles traditionally have been about 5 feet across. The new regulations are moving to more European specs where it's 1800 millimeters, which is about 6 feet across. 1-inch curb. I'll double check that because they disappear for me right away, Amanda. So just make sure I get back to all the questions after, because they're here and then they vanish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can read it to you if you wanted to answer it quickly, because we've just talked about bathrooms.
Okay,
so it said,
perfect.
is it easy to get a retrofit a 2 to an inch curb to make a shower curbless? I'm not sure if I said all those words. Is it easy to get retrofit a 2 to inch curb? Yeah, sorry if you wanna.
Oh, maybe.
My
curb is 2-3 inches. I chose that. I shouldn't have. When I moved into my apartment, I should have had it completely. I had the choice. Stupid me. Now I'm in a wheelchair. So basically there's a whole gymnastic that my husband has to help me. So I'm looking at getting rid of that curve. It slopes down. So in some places 2 inches, some it's 3. It was done by a contractor, an architect. So they haven't really got back to me. This is why I will consult with you once we are finished.
Yeah, it might be one we'd want to take a look at for sure. There are a couple products that do a retrofit unit, so you can kind of pop out your old shower and put in a new one that's much lower threshold. It doesn't tend to get it quite to 0 because there's framing underneath, but there are some framing details we have that can retrofit out, but it usually requires a bit more invasive stuff. Going with one of the super low thresholds and then a little, who is it now? They just did a presentation. I can't think of their name. Schluter, the guys that make Purdy systems, and they make all those pretty trims that go around tiles. They also make kind of I guess it's a bit of a ramp, I call it, that kind of makes a less than curbless shower easier to access.
Cool, thank you. Well, yeah, I'll get you to come by.
Yeah, we just did some training on it, so we'll make sure we
I'm in the neighborhood, so I'm in the Beechwood area.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And Paul Merck came about 2 years ago about the kitchen, the galley kitchen, but we'll talk about this. I definitely want to get you. And it's interesting. I'm here in Toronto. I just came a couple of hours ago for a meeting with MPPs about Canada Accessible Act and this and Ontario codes. And I actually work for the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and I have a blog, and it's now going to focus on Spanish design and stuff, but it's now focusing on accessibility because it's much neglected.
Yeah, so when you're consulting with those MPs, beat them up a little.
I will. Thank you.
So on this one, so as I was mentioning, the turning circle, we're moving to a more European model. So the Europeans have been using 1800 millimeters for quite some time. And so we're going that way. So the custom homes we're doing now, we're planning for the 1800 millimeters, easier for the larger device. And also the big factor I think that gets forgotten is if you have a personal service worker, having enough space for them to assist whomever is in a mobility device. So that was, my father did that. He was a rehabilitation nurse. So he always gets a little annoyed if I don't plan enough space for the personal service worker. So that's a great upside to having a wider turning radius. And then wider spaces in general. So you can see around this kitchen island, nice big wide space. You can go as small as kind of 36 inches in a traditional kitchen. Much, much too small if you're looking at anyone with a mobility device trying to use that. Honestly, even if you got two people trying to use it, that's a little bit tight. We rarely do that. You can see in this case, we're looking more like 4 feet or 4'6", depending on the stuff that that might be being used at the same time or by whom. So much wider spaces in a spot like a kitchen. Another one that's super easy to plan that if you're doing a reno is right height switches. When you're actually installing the switch, it does not cost any extra to put it lower. It does, however, cost a great deal extra if you've put it at a standard height and need to lower it later. And that's where we find
I don't mind having it now. This might go on for a bit. I you
You have a back with the spoons, no?
I think you can just go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thanks. Never know if it's on my end. Yeah, so this is one either raising the outlets or lowering the switches. Very easy to do as part of a bigger project, and a big kind of a reno. If you have to retrofit that in, it gets a little bit tricky. The nice thing with all the smart switches now is if you are stuck with a switch that's at sort of the standard height that they install them at least now you can talk to it. But in a perfect world, if we're planning a reno, we'll lower those switches. Doesn't cost anything different. Easy to read or smart thermostats. They're mostly all smart now when we're doing renovations and fairly easy to read. There are still a few smart ones I've seen that are not handy to read at all. So just discuss that model ahead of time. Sort of the common, well-known ones, the Ecobees and stuff, are usually connected to other devices. So a pretty good option that way. And then this was a standard one, I think, that I want to say Enercare was selling for a while, and it was a smart one that was actually fairly easy to read. So there are lots of options out there that just knowing to plan ahead. Specialty equipment. So there's a ton of specialty equipment. We included this picture because I happen to have one in my house. So that's a sensory swing or sensory sock. They do require some turning radius and somewhere to hang it that is structurally solid. And that's one of the big things to consider. Power structural needs. If you have something like a lift that might be running between bed area and an ensuite, that does require some structural and power considerations. So we just sent a set in for the truss designers to work on, and we've marked out, hey, we need additional reinforcing here. There's a lift going on it. So that kind of thing. And then the space around it. So if you've got sort of well, these obviously need a bit of room. Sometimes there's different kinds of like change tables or shower tables and stuff that do require some additional room. Plan for that. You want to make sure that's noted on the plans. If you have an OT or a physiotherapist that can take a look at the plans and make sure we've provided enough space, definitely do that. We have a couple sets of plans out with OTs and folks right now to provide some feedback. Here's another one that you do have to potentially supply some additional power for. So if you're intending to have a lift on the stairs, then there may need to be a power outlet top or bottom to make sure we can plug it in. Typically, they don't need a completely separate circuit, but if they might need battery backup, then they may need to be on a special circuit for that. So different considerations to think about for sure. But I was kind of pleased to find out it can be kind of plugged in normally for a lot of the options that we're looking at. So it's kind of a nice thing. I had been planning additional on a job to have extra power, but it did fit nicely. So, and then top and bottom, these do require a bit of consideration because they need somewhere to park. So they can't be sitting in the middle of the hallway. So something to work around how they get installed. So kind of leading in from there, the power consideration. So generators may be something that's needed if you have kind of life-saving equipment that needs to be powered in. You'll want to look at a battery backup or a generator. Same if you've got an elevator that may need to stay powered if you have to leave the house and there's no one to assist. An elevator may need backup power that way. Plumbing considerations, so that comes in if you're looking at things, especially like the walk-in tubs. So some of them have different requirements, so they drain quick enough. If they drain too slowly and the water gets cold before it empties, then whomever is using the tub also gets cold. And depending on how that person's nerves and sensors stuff work, they may not know they're getting cold. So we want to make sure that the plumbing will drain that as quickly as the tub is designed to be drained and fills it quickly as well. So things to talk about with the plumber. We do a little job show before we start a renovation, so we talk our plumber through that. It's things to plan about. Installation's another one. Drafts tend to affect people who are older and have maybe some different sensory conditions as well differently. So we're spray foaming the headers in this case, which helps beat some of that draft that comes right in around the baseboards, right? So it can make a home just more comfortable. It's one of those ones we tend to do anyway, but it is a good accessible consideration as well. So different folks, as I mentioned, we want to get as many people involved sort of from the assisted living side on it. Obviously, we'll have the architectural designer, we'll have those trade specialists, so someone will come in and talk about an elevator. We'll have the different specialists come in and talk about the plumbing. We do often look now at home automation specialists if the systems are complicated. A lot of homeowners seem happy to do them themselves, but we do have a couple companies that'll help us with those when it gets really interesting. We do want home medical equipment specialists. So if you've got specialized lifts or something like that, we want to make sure that we're covering those well. And like I mentioned, physiotherapists, PSWs, OTs, anyone who can provide that sort of additional advice and additional set of eyes. The training we do is great and we get to see a lot of different things, but every person and every sort of condition that someone might have is going to be very, very different, and how it affects everyone is very, very different. So that's where having those caregivers and family and different doctors and stuff involved in the project, make sure that we've accounted for it as well as we can. We can be really good experts at building. We are never going to be medical experts. So that's a piece of the team that, if it's necessary, to get them involved and consult them if, say, especially for things that are a bit more complicated. So regulations. Regulations are fun sometimes. So these are two really good ones. The biggest one for renovations that we talk about is the first one, and CSA B65223. So the 23 tells you that it is very, very new. We finally got one in Canada, and that one's specifically focused on accessible dwellings. It's got a lot of those guides about how wide doorways should be and how they interact, and ramps and different things like that, sizes and heights for where things should go. It is available for free, which is kind of cool. It's pretty rare you get a CSA document you can download for free, but you can get it right from, I think it's Accessibility Standards Canada or something like that. You can download it from. You can download it from CSA. So it's really neat as a reference guide. When we're doing bigger houses, so tending towards like multi-unit stuff, that's when the other one falls in B65118. So really it only kicks in if you're doing multi-unit sort of things. If you're getting into fourplexes and that kind of stuff, then some of that would kick in. Couple other ones. So the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Handbook. So that's what they use to judge whether or not a building can be certified as adaptive under their regulations. Right now, they're not certifying homes. They're working that way. We keep that guide handy. Partly, I got my certification through there to do the certifications, but it's a really handy guide and gives you a lot of things to think about as you're planning ahead. Ontario Building Code and local zoning. Obviously, they do have some impact. The building code is the barest of minimum requirements. So it's good. We have to do those things. But if that's all you're relying on for accessibility, probably won't get you where you want to be. And then national provincial legislation. So there's the Access for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which can impact things a little. Accessible Canada Act. Again, it's surprisingly recent. Only 2019. So exactly what its impact will be on sort of built environment, especially as it comes to houses, is still a little up in the air. But at least part of that development has led to the CSA standards, so we've got that to work on, and we'll see where the ACA goes. Hopefully somewhere good. Some other resources you can look up. So there is the Flex Housing Guide. That was the program that the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation came out with a while ago. It's probably almost 20 years now. So they called it Flex Housing. Same idea. They've got checklists and stuff on their website. It's kind of cool. The Universal Design Institute and Universal Design Canada, just different organizations with some neat ideas. And if you're ever kind of watching those TV shows from the UK, they sometimes talk about the Lifetime Home Standard. It's really neat. Again, no actual legislative application here, obviously, but kind of a neat checklist to go through, and some different ideas they have and some different things they've tried over there. So something neat to read if you're looking for different ideas. The training we mentioned, so we have 2 designers on our team that are certified as Adaptiv Home Professionals. So there's a course you have to take to make you do sort of different test runs and different almost little charrette things as you go through. You do have to do all of those, and then you have to pass an exam. So our staff passed the exam. So we get to be Adaptiv Certified. The Rick Hansen Found one I mentioned, that's all administered through the Accessibility Institute of Carleton. Really neat programs and stuff that they offer through Carleton U. So you may see people with different kind of certifications that way. They might be able to provide different levels of advice. The neat thing about Adaptiv Home is that in the courses, it's not limited only to architectural designers, OTs and nurses and different sort of professionals that way. The folks who are like focusing on the elevator and stuff, like the specialists in the equipment, they can also take that course and be certified as well. Which is really cool because it gives us sort of a common spot to work on collaboration from. So really neat program that way. We do have a few notes kind of to end the presentation about some very general things when you're looking for a renovator. Always look for those different certifications. Another one you can look for is RenoMark. That one is just sort of a little bit of a sign of extra professionalism. You see there's a training, this code of ethics. It's another program of the Canadian Home Builders Association. Renovation isn't an industry that has like licensing regulations the same way that some others do, but RenoMark is sort of the what our governing body has provided to a little bit of that. Do some research, be aware of web ads, obviously. I think we all know now anything can be put on the web. That's the downside of AI. It'll make your house more accessible, but it may make the ads a little more sketchy. So definitely do some research and call references when you get them. We do recommend finding out a few of the different things. Do they have insurance? WSIB, BCIN. So WSIB is insurance, BCIN is your building code identification number. That way you know your designer is actually registered with the provincial authority and knows how to read the code. And different things about that. Areas of specialization. So especially in things like adaptive renovations. I know you see here the horror stories because like I said, my dad was a renovation nurse. So there are all sorts of folks who are out there saying they can do something adaptive. Maybe, maybe not. Ask for references. Take a look at oh, thank you. Take a look at what they've done in the past to make sure that when they say they're doing something adaptive, they can actually deliver something adaptive. And then get it in writing. This we put in every single one of our presentations because it's super important. Again, stuff from the Canadian Home Builders Association that can help. Make sure your contract is in writing so you have start dates, finish dates, what you're going to be getting, and then you have some legal protection if something does go wrong. So please, whether you hire us or hire someone else, please get it in writing. And a little bit about our process. So we do have sort of a 5-step process that we follow. So we'll send someone out to do that initial consultation. Then we'll do a bit of a planning for success. And that's the big spot we talk about adaptive things in those first 2 to make sure that we've got all that planning in place. And then as we go through the other steps, the magic of creation, that's a lot of the selections to make sure that that meets the accessibility requirements we set out. Then off to work and enjoying your space. Obviously, those are the enjoying your space is the most important one, and make sure it's an adaptive and comfortable space going forward. So we do offer, well, if we're all here in person, we have a nice little card to give you, but if you're looking at meeting with one of our coordinators, just mention you came here, to get the virtual card instead, and they'll set up a meeting to come out and talk about maybe some options in your home. Where possible, I know they try to bring me along. Sometimes it's just one of our coordinators who are, we have a couple who are really experienced in this side too. Say if I'm available, they try to bring me along when they can as well. And then off to any questions. Now I know we'd saved a couple because I had to think about the code one more. But any other ones as well? Maybe Amanda, can you grab? Maybe I can open it now.
Yeah, the one from before was asking, so I think it's about codes in general, about what maybe would be some resources, but for public spaces. We think we talked a lot about on the residential side, but what would be some resources or some guidelines for public spaces?
Yeah, the Ontario Building Code does cover public spaces in Part 3. That's where the accessibility stuff comes in. Also, public spaces are covered under the CSA B651 18. That covers sort of those bigger public spaces too. And Rick Hansen actually does a really good job with their foundation certifying public spaces. So you'll see a number of buildings around that are public that are certified as accessible. So that's sort of, if you want it to go, that's like the gold standard. If you've got a Rick Hansen certification, your building is accessible. If you've met the code, let's say there's, I think anyone who works in any speciality within the construction industry is going to have the same sort of love-hate relationship with the code. It does what it needs to do, but that's all. So the rules around public spaces, I know I was in some consultation a while back around the sizes of doors, and it's a constant fight about how big a door ought to be. And it's ridiculous that the code won't increase the size of a door more than kind of where they've gone. So yeah, the code is the code. You have to follow it. But if you actually want to be accessible or adaptive, you need to go beyond it.
Great. I see some people typing in the